generation of warfare, psychological warfare. In modern conflict, the mind is a potent weapon. Discover General Michael T. Flynn's groundbreaking guide, The Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. Unlock tactics, strategies, and the mindset to navigate this cognitive battlefield that we all find ourselves in. Equip yourself against manipulation and emerge unscathed. Unleash your potential. Order now.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the AlphaWarrior Show. I am your host, Alpha. It is Wednesday night, April 29th, 2026, which means it is Operation Gladio night. It's going to be a fun conversation. I'm very interested in hearing what the Colonel has for us tonight. Weather modification, President George Bush, C.I.A. I mean, that seems like a recipe for bad news, and we're going to get into that. But before we get into that, let's pay some bills, folks, and do me a solid. Hit the heart, smash the thumb, share this out. Let's get a great audience here for Operation Gladio, and we'll come back just after these messages.
Science proves that a healthy immune system is the body's first defense against the smallest of ailments to the most catastrophic. Coriolus versicolor is the most sought-after, all-natural supplement for both humans and pets to help boost the immune system. There are over 400 studies worldwide on its effectiveness in humans, including Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, MD Anderson Cancer Center, and now from the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine. Together, we can help reverse this terrible tide now plaguing your loved ones and give them the immune-boosting supplements that they need.
It's finally here, our second annual mega sale. This sale only comes around once a year, so take advantage of the best offers ever while you can. For example, save 50% on our Giza Dream bed sheets, as low as $29.98. And for the first time ever on TV, My Pillow mattresses and My Pillow mattress toppers, as low as $99.98. And you save 50% on our Lux Pure 6-piece towel sets, regular $69.98, now only $39.98. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, regular $49.98, on sale for $17.98. Wait on it, mega sale, only $14.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our second annual mega sale. But wait, there's more. To make the mega sale even more special, when you order right now, your order's going to ship absolutely free.
Absolutely free. And our last one on deck until we get to the end of the show, folks. You'll see it, QR code on your screen if you're watching on Rumble. Neutronics Lab supports the immune system. It's going to burn some fat, muscle building, joint health, improve sleep, combat stress, that's the cortisol, and boosts energy and libido. What else does it do? It makes you feel like a beast, folks. If you guys saw the show that I did with Doc and Ron Oliver, I'm talking about this bad boy stuff right here. You got Manzets, testosterone, that's the booster in there. And then also talking about this right here. IGF-1. This is a 300,000 nanogram one right here. This stuff is solid. When I go to the gym, and you guys know I talk about this a lot, make America healthy, make ourselves healthy. I know my workouts usually around 2 hours or so. I know when I'm getting to the tail end of that workout. I know how I feel. Since I've been taking this now, I get to the end of the workout. I told my buddy, I was on the phone with him. I'm like, man, I feel like I can do a whole new workout. This stuff, folks, it's phenomenal. It's organic. So you don't have to worry about the side effects of synthetics and things like that. Look into it, folks. As a matter of fact, go to neutronicslabs.com/alpha. You'll save 50% with the auto ship and a platinum bottle of IGF-1 completely free of charge. Plus, you'll get an extra 10% off when you use promo code ALPHA. I use this stuff. As a matter of fact, I was so pumped about it when I was on a conference call with Ron that he got them to send me. They're now selling it, the 1 million nanogram version of this. It's the gold bottle. I'm pumped to start taking that one. So as soon as this one runs out, which I'm already getting there, I use it so much, that one will be next. So folks, go to Neutronics Labs, use that promo code Alpha. And with that, as you guys are all getting in your beast mode and making yourselves healthy, we're going to get into Gladio. Colonel, I'm telling you, my energy level these days is just boom. It's cool.
So Alpha and I were talking before the show, and it's 9:00 my time. I walk in here, I start talking to Alpha, and I feel like I'm on fire. We had such a great talk before we came on air. I made him a little late. That's my fault. But
Got me fired up.
Yeah, you definitely got me fired up.
What a time to be alive. There's a lot of things we need to be concerned with. There's things that we can't ignore, and we got to address it. But we are most definitely fighting the good fight behind a tremendous president, and knowing that this information is starting to get out to now, you do hashtag Operation Gladio, and there's just people talking about it now.
Yes.
And that makes me fired up. You had given me some news. I didn't share it with my audience because I didn't know if you went public with it yet or not.
So I did with my audience. Okay. Nothing's been firmed up, but I appeared recently on Redacted in their first segment of the Southern Poverty Law Center, which we covered last week. So I was just going over some of those same notes that I did with your audience. And in the gallery, for those of you who don't know, a little behind the scenes, it's done via Zoom, and you can see who's coming up behind you. And so Alex Jones joined the show, and I don't know at what point he did, because I don't pay attention to that side thing. But he was there for most of the segment, and he had his scheduler reach out to Clayton Morris' staff and asked to have me on his show. So they relayed that information and my contact information. I have not heard back from them, so it may or may not happen, but he was impressed with some of the information, which of course I approach everything from a Gladio perspective in how, just with all the stuff. If you haven't seen the show last week, go watch it. It is very, very interesting on the role that they play, not only in all of the stuff that's being put out there, but directly with the Oklahoma bombing and many other aspects of it. So I would highly encourage people to go watch that.
100%. And I'm going to say this because I'm going to get ahead of it in the chat, because I know but AJ's gone crazy. I don't care. Okay, folks, it's an audience. Okay, it's an audience. And
it's a huge audience.
It's a huge audience. As Trump would say, it's huge. It's huge, right? And you want to get Gladio in front of those people. And people have to remember this. This is not about whether you like people or you align with people. We're in an information war for this country, for humanity. I mean, it's not just our country, for humanity. And if we can get the Colonel in front of millions of people, why in the world would anybody ever want to pass that up? That's insanity. I can't wait to see it happen. I can't wait to see how he responds to the information you're going to give him. I'm really curious to. It'll be something like that.
It'll be very interesting. For those of your audience who doesn't remember, way back at the very beginning, like how long have we been doing this? Over 2 years now. At the very beginning, Alpha and I got together because of an appearance that I did on Trump Frog Spaces well over 2 years ago. And it was the most sabotaged space. So it's the very first time I've talked about it on a large forum. There was several thousand people in his audience that night. Over at least 20 times, they kicked me out of the space. I'm the actual guest speaker. They kicked me out of the space. The following day, Jack Posobiec went on his show, Human Events, and spent like 5 minutes saying how Operation Gladio is this thing that happened like 40 years ago. It doesn't exist, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, that's really odd. And of course, I don't watch his show, but somebody had taken a clip of it and sent it to me. And I was like, why the hell would he say that? And then the very next day, which was a Wednesday, because that was Monday night, Wednesday, he went on Alex Jones' show and said the exact same thing. So for no other reason, I'm going to go on Alex Jones' show and prove him wrong, because that's the kind of person I am.
100%. And here's the thing, and it's Golfing Frog, shout out if you're listening, brother. I know every now and then he does. When I went in that space and I heard you talking about Operation Gladio, I remember telling myself, I've been digging. How do I not know about this? it blew my mind. I'm like, how did this one get past me? And so I reached out.
Exactly the same thing. I was in the Air Force for 30 years. How did it get past me?
And so now imagine the millions of people that are going to watch Alex Jones and eventually Tucker, because Tucker will call you too. Imagine the millions of people that are going to be like, how have I never heard about this? And then they're going to go and they're going to start searching. And then they're going to find everything that's been put out there. That's a game changer, folks. So, weather modification, Bush, C.I.A.
Okay. So here's my world, and I'm going to walk you through this. I just came across this. Someone sent me a clip, a post that someone had made that had a video attached to it yesterday. So I'm still pulling this together. I will put it in an article when I get all of this together. So I apologize up front if it's a little disconnected, but I want to walk you through what a normal kind of research rabbit hole comes to every single time I do this, because it's crazy. So in the clip that someone sent me, let me just read it. My extensive research into the subject indicates that Tianan, it's T-A-I-N-A-N, airport in southwestern Taiwan is the global home of dedicated chemtrail fleets. All right. So I stopped right there and I'm like, what are you saying here? Okay. So I know a lot of people are going to be, hey, are you going to talk about Gladio controlling the weather? No, I'm not. There's a lot of people out there that have a lot of extensive research into weather control. I suggest you go watch those shows. I'm not a weather expert. I don't claim to be a weather expert, but I just did on the premium part of Rumble an entire declassification document on the YouTube program, Oxcart, and the SR-71. Do you know the excuse that the CIA came up with when they, in the 1950s, began flying the U-2, which, by the way, also got mischaracterized as a UFO because it flies so high that it can be dark on the East Coast where the West Coast, the sun's still shining. And if the U-2 is flying over the United States, it was flying so high, and no one flew that high at all, unclassified, like above 70,000 feet, that the sun, which had not set in the west, would reflect off of the underbelly of the U-2, and it looked, because of the speed and the height at which it was, like it was a UFO. And over 50% in the 1950s of the UFOs was confirmed at what became the Air Force Research Lab, because they were tracking all the U-2 flights from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, to actually be U-2 confirmed flights. So that was kind of, and the reason why they never painted the underbelly of the U-2 is because they couldn't afford the weight. It was such a flimsy made aircraft because it had no spinal connectivity, because they actually took the wings off of it when they transported it to forward locations. It didn't have the structural integrity that normal aircraft has. And so they couldn't afford the extra 200 pounds to paint the aircraft underbelly. And so I was just fascinated. We read through the entire declassification history of the U-2. And so as soon as I saw Tiananmen Airport, I was like, holy shit, that's a CIA. That's where the U-2s were, in Taiwan. So they had very few detachments around the world. One of them was in Afghanistan, or I'm sorry, Turkey, that they flew over Afghanistan. One of them was in Taiwan. and they actually trained the Shanghai Sheiks, KMT, the drug guys, how to fly the U-2 aircraft. And there were several of them that crashed on missions into China. They flew into mainland China all the time, and lost several pilots as a result of that. So as soon as I saw that airport, I was like, oh shit, that's CIA. And so the post goes on to say, it appears the CIA has been using the vassal state of Taiwan as a fortress from which they are running the global chemtrail spraying operations. And I was like, what? The CIA facilities in Taiwan is doing these spray missions? Because one of the things everybody says, not everybody, a lot of people accuse the military of flying these flights. Now, guys, I spent 8 years in aircraft maintenance. I can tell you that we do have C-130s that have spray missions, but not this kind of a spray mission. They go to spray for mosquitoes in Latin America and do things like that. And they're not retrofitted with the same type of equipment that would be required to do weather modification. I know a lot of the pilots that flew on those C-130s. They're primarily in the Guard and Reserve. So also, they're not going to risk an actual U.S. Air Force identified aircraft that can be seen landing and identifiable to fly that type of a mission, because it's classified. So what I have now learned is that the CIA has acquired things like C-130s and C-141s and retrofitted them to fly these missions, and they're black aircraft. They have no identifiers on them at all. Now, a lot of people say, well, the 141s has been retired. They have. But just because the Air Force retires an aircraft does not mean the CIA has retired those same aircraft. Because they have a facility in the United States, one of them in Texas and one of them in Arizona, where they do modifications to retired Air Force aircraft, paint them all black, and allow proprietary airlines to fly them. So now all of this is starting to make sense to me, right? I'm like, oh, holy shit. And they're using what is known to be a CIA facility in Taiwan, which is the global hub of this. So the post goes on. After all, the CIA cut out E-Systems, which is another company in Dallas, Texas, that I have researched extensively as a CIA proprietary, which we'll get into in a minute, owned and operated massive aircraft maintenance facilities in Tiananmen while they built the first version of the HARP antenna. Right there, the CIA is on record as having the necessary electromagnetic energy as well as aircraft maintenance facilities needed to pull off what this guy refers to as a new Manhattan project. Okay, so I went back into my notes. The fact that Tiananmen Airport is being used and all of the extensive CIA capability there started to make perfect sense. So a guy by the name of Peter Kirby published extensive information on what is dubbed the New Manhattan Project, and is basically the primary author of a lot of the information that talks about the use of these electromagnetic waves and the aerial spray missions in order to generate weather. Now, again, we know that they modify weather because they did it in Vietnam. This has been an ongoing, what I didn't know is they were doing it out of Taiwan as like a master facility. That's the piece that was new to me. He talks extensively about the R&D and climate engineering. His basic synopsis of this is with Tiananmen's history as a staging ground for CIA proprietaries like Civil Air Transport and Air America is central to this conversation. There's also on Substack, if you search for E-Systems or the New Manhattan Project, you're going to find things like Forbidden News and some of the Substacks that actively talk about this. They categorize Tiananmen as a dual-use facility. They've also, in some of the articles on Substack, actually cross-referenced flight tracking data that shows the correlation to weather events being launched out of this facility. So E-Systems is a company, and we're going to go into quite a bit of detail about them in a minute, but just the high level stuff. It is actually kind of the crux of what we're going to talk about. When the 1970s happened and the year of the intelligence investigations, like in 1975, where you have the Church Committee and all of the bad stuff is coming out about the CIA, MK Ultra, all of those different things are being exposed. One of the things that Congress, part of that whole thing was the CIA needed to get out of the aircraft proprietary business. They needed to not have all of these covert airlines that they were basically funding. So they had this big, huge facility at this Tiananmen facility. Well, that's where E-Systems come in. So they had to get rid of the Civil Air Transport aircraft, and they had to get rid of the Air America, the kind of a subsidiary of them, and a whole bunch of others. We'll touch on a couple of them. But they had all of these people with all of these high-level clearances, and they didn't want to lose them. And keep in mind, who's the CIA director for Ford when all this stuff is coming out? George H.W. Bush, right? Because Jimmy Carter comes in afterwards and decides he doesn't want to keep Bush on as the CIA director. So they create a plan to have E-Systems set up at this same facility and basically continue to employ all of these people in Taiwan. And there was another airline over there at the time called Air Asia. It was another proprietary. So if you start looking into this, it all starts making sense. Also, there is government documents that was published by the Atmospheric Radiation Measurement Program that contained diagrams and technical specifications that independent researchers have done comparison to contrails and how they overlap. And then, of course, everybody talks about HAARP being part of this by electromagnetic heating facilities. And there were patents filed by E-Systems and Raytheon that was related to what they called Welsbach seating, which is exactly that. And this is E-Systems. So we talked a little bit about and all of our audience knows, I'm not going to spend any time in the article that I'm writing. I went over a little bit about the KMT history with Taiwan and all of that. So we don't need to spend any time on that. But it's a direct correlation. And I wanted to include that YouTube piece just to show how integrated the air operations were in Taiwan with the CIA.
Regarding real quick E-Systems, Colonel, because I want to make sure I'm looking up the right one. When I search it out, it gives me a redirect. So let me show everybody what it shows. E-Systems. And it redirects me to Raytheon Intelligence Information and Services. And
Yeah.
I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah, 'cause we're gonna go through the history of them, and they're intimately tied to Raytheon, another defense contractor. Yeah, it is very interesting. Um, so by connecting the physical maintenance capabilities of E-Systems with their patents and the geopolitical protection afforded of putting this facility under the protection of the KMT in Taiwan, you basically have the perfect scenario to launch these coordinated weather modification things. So I looked into how civil air transport transitioned into E-Systems. And so what you find is very interesting. By 1975, Air America, which was the successor to civil air transport, was, like I said, under the gun because of all the stuff that was coming out in the Church Committee and all of the ones that happened in 1975. E-Systems was based in Dallas. And E-Systems was set up in 1972 as a spinoff of a company called Ling, Temco, and Vogt, VOUGHT. It went by the acronym LTV, which is very interesting date, 1972, because what was going on in 1972? Oh, that's when they were setting up Nugent Hand Bank to money launder drug money. That's when they set up BCCI. So there was a lot of crap going on in 1972 in relation to the CIA and all of their worldwide network. So LTV had been the primary contractor for many of the maintenance and modifications and logistical support to civil air transport and Air America. They're the, you know, when we deploy aircraft in the military, you have the actual flying squadrons that get in their airplane and go. And then you have the logistics tell that all of the maintainers to maintain those aircraft and all the spare parts and the extra engines, they all get on separate aircraft and go forward to set up the maintenance capability for the aircraft that are deploying. So imagine LTV as that maintenance package for the CIA. They were the ones that went forward to all of these remote airfields the CIA did these operations out of and basically set up the logistical tail because it was all classified, right? So when E-Systems took over, they acquired the physical maintenance facilities at the Taiwan airport called Tiananmen from Air Asia Company Limited, which was a CIA proprietary. And they had been providing all of the logistical tail to include air operations for the CIA in Taiwan and Asia theater, which again is drugs and weapons. Okay, the transition was set up so that they could keep all of the highly skilled workforce, most of which were former military and intelligence connected people in place in Taiwan, so that they didn't have any lack of continuity. By moving the operations into E-Systems, the agencies utilized what was referred to as a contractor-owned, contractor-operated model outside of kind of the proprietary company where technically the CIA owned the whole thing through a front company that existed only on paper. Let me get down to the other part. Let me get down here. So if you track the individuals, I want to name a couple of them. There was a guy by the name of George Doole, D-O-O-L-E Jr. He officially retired from heading the CIA Pacific Proprietary Network right about the same time in the mid-1970s. He had been the architect of the Civil Air Transport, Air America, and Air Asia. He was the contact point for the agency's quiet divestiture. He also was intimately involved in corresponding with LTV and E-Systems during this transition. William Leary, he was the kind of brainiac behind all of this. His private archive collection is in a multitude of different libraries, which I'm going to make a point of trying to get a hold of. But he's oftentimes left out of the history of this. At the time, E-Systems chairman was a guy by the name of John W. Dixon. Dixon oversaw the expansion of what they referred to as the Greenville Division, which we'll get to in a minute. That was where they specially modified primarily military aircraft, but also Cessnas and some smaller Learjet type aircraft with quote unquote special modifications to keep everything covert. There are, if you start looking around, you'll find SEC commission filings of E-Systems becoming a publicly traded entity in 1972. And there's paperwork out there that talks about the aircraft by tail number being transferred from places like Air Asia over to these other entities. Also, part of this was the Flying Tigers. Several of their aircraft was included in these transitions. There was another company, just for those of you who like to do research, called Pacific Corporation. It was the holding company that housed Air America and Air Asia. On paper, it got liquidated in 1976. If you look at a lot of that paperwork, you'll see E-Systems quite often in that paperwork. Let me get down to the next part of this. I'm trying to skip over the part that our audience already knows. There was something referred to in the transition called the dealing with this maintenance package, the Black Cat Squadron. And I had not come across this before, but the Black Cat Squadron was what the Taiwanese had nicknamed their CIA counterparts in Taiwan. It basically was the guys, that's the nickname of their squadron. You know, like in the fighter squadrons, like the Homestead unit was always referred to as the Makos because that's like a shark. They all have names. The U-2 flying squadron made up of the KMT was called the Black Cats. Yeah, that's it. So let me go on down. All right, so let's talk about the Greenfield. The Greenfield was referred to as the crown jewel of E-Systems. It was located in Greenville, Texas, at Majors Field Airport. This facility was essentially the nexus of C.I.A.'s black requirements when they needed mechanical and electronic modifications made to them. When Ling, Temco, and Vogt LTV divested its aviation division to form E-Systems in 1972, the Greenfield facility was the most sensitive piece of this transition. It's referred to as a modification and maintenance facility for special mission aircraft. And basically, what has been reported is that they specialized in one-off modifications to aircrafts like the C-130, the C-141, and Boeing 707, where they would gut them, install clandestine sensor suites, SIG antennas, and other modifications to include atmospheric modifications, as well as electronic warfare capability on these aircraft. So Greenville was the largest facility of its kind in the world, modifying aircraft to do things they were never designed to do. If the CIA needed something that required large capability, like a heavy lift aircraft, especially one to do this weather modification, because there are internal pressurized tanks that are required for this aerosol dispersal. Obviously, they also need antenna arrays for the ionosphere interaction. All of that stuff was done at Greenfield as far as the modification of the aircraft. And then they would take the aircraft to Taiwan to fly missions out of there. And again, all of these aircraft are refuelable. And from a mission capability, the only tasking that the TACC at Scott Air Force Base is going to get from the CIA, which they have to, by law, fulfill, is they would get tanker requirements to refuel these aircraft. There's no knowledge, there's no tracking from the TACC where these aircraft are going or what missions they're going on, because they're all classified at a level above the TACC. And so the CIA would just call the TACC, which is the Air Mobility Command's requirement shop. If you've got a flight going and you need a refueling at a particular juncture over the Pacific, if they're flying back into the United States, then you just get a hooker hookup, a tanker hookup, a hooker hookup, a tanker hookup. That was a Freudian slip. So going back to our conversation before we came on the air, you get a tanker hookup, and they just tell you where they need the tanker hookup, and you'll have a tanker there waiting for you. You refuel and you keep on your flight. That tanker doesn't pay attention to where you took off from or where you're going. Their mission is to give you fuel. So you get a lot of very interesting side benefits from this hookup, because the location is classified where the aircraft took off. They don't fly with transponders on, and generally, and you have plausible deniability because it's not being launched from the United States. They may be flying over the United States. They're not launched from here. And that's critical to this type of mission.
Let me interject a comment that's from an article in the Washington Post from 1994. It says, in short, E-Systems technology, part of the central nervous system for the nation's intelligence community, are regarded as brilliant by the intelligence agencies and Wall Street. But the firm's closets also contain some classified skeletons. Critics say in some ways the company is almost indistinguishable from the CIA because it operates so secretly, lacks accountability, and is loaded with retirees from the CIA and other intelligence agencies. E-Systems critics say it is lied in legal proceedings to protect its interest.
And they will never be held accountable.
1994, Colonel.
Yes, I know. And if they get sued for one of the next things is their no bid contracts. So I don't know if you're familiar, if you ever had any contracting experience, but when you contract from the government, you have to put the contract out for bids. There are exceptions to that for sole source contracts, which is what they call them. In this article I was reading, they had it labeled as a quote unquote no bid contract, but that's a sole source contract. That means no one else can give you that capability. And E-Systems, almost every single contract they ever got from the government was sole source, meaning they're the only ones that do it. because they're the only ones that are modifying CIA aircraft that have the clearances to do it. So it's the perfect setup, which goes to your point in that Washington Post article. They do this setup so that they can legally have this quote unquote separate company, but they're not separate. They function as a proprietary, but in the case of E-Systems, it was a public company that no one knew about. Not generally. So they were indistinguishable from the CIA in every, just like Air America was, just like Civil Air Transport was. By doing this and classifying these contracts, there were literally no audit trails, none. And in the case of a lot of the stuff the CIA does, they route the dollars, the procurement dollars or the modification dollars through the Pentagon's aircraft modification programs. So that's also critically important. So by doing that, you're never going to find a contract that actually talks about things, for example, specialty nozzles, high altitude heating elements, or dispersal pumps that are all required on these weather modification aircraft. You're not going to find them because the contracts themselves to produce them are classified under quote unquote national security. That's critical. So if you go to visit Greenville, there have been some people that tried. There are guards everywhere. Everything is labeled high security. There's no way to get to any of these facilities, according to material that I was reading while researching this.
I can imagine the level of security for something that is allegedly tied to the Central Intelligence Agency. It's not going to happen. Look, if you try to go into the Scientology headquarters, like that is difficult. That we used to, because out here in Southern California, Hemet San Jacinto area, there's a Scientology building that's there. And when I was on the task force, because you're working with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department and you drive through there, we're in unmarked cars. And you could see these guys will start tailing us from the security apparatus that's there. Can you imagine the freaking CIA? Like, it's not going to happen. Let me fire off a real quick ad here on Rumble Colonel. And
well, wait a minute. Let me tell you my Scientology story, and then you can read your ad. My daughter is a huge Tom Cruise fan. There's no one living in the United States that's a bigger Tom Cruise fan than my daughter. She knows every single thing about his entire life. Because I'm responsible for that because of my obsession with Top Gun. And that's the way she was raised. But her and a girlfriend, one of the other band members of the band, her old band, went over to the Scientology actual headquarters in St. Petersburg. And they parked a fair distance away and walked up because he supposedly has a house there. And so they just walked up to the front gates. Within 5 seconds, somebody is out there wanting to know what they were doing. That's how secure that facility is.
They don't mess around. As a matter of fact, some of the littler offices that they have throughout the country, and I don't advocate for this, I'm nearly repeating something that's out there, a trend, and I would say don't do it because it's trespassing, but there's these groups of younger people, adults, but younger, they do these viral videos, Colonel, where they run into the Scientology buildings while they're recording, and they're recording the security chasing them around. But they're using these different groups that are doing it now to map out these facilities. It's crazy. Listen, y'all don't want to miss with you don't want to mess with the Scientology people. No. But here's something that you do want to do. You're going to see a QR code populate on the screen. If you're watching on Rumble. If you're not, you got to come over to Rumble, and you'll see the link down in the description, folks. MCG Tactical Precision Gear, unmatched performance as always. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to shoot with the same precision tech used by the U.S. Special Forces? Well, good news. After years of research and development, the MCG Tactical just dropped something incredible, the Stinger Combat Sight. This isn't your average red dot. Using holographic technology once reserved for elite military and law enforcement, the Stinger delivers crystal clear precision, so accurate you can hit a dime at 300 yards without even trying. This is the exact same level of technology used by the pros, but here is the twist. Most sites like this go for $600 or more, and people happily pay it. But right now, through an exclusive deal with MCG Tactical, you can get this mil-spec sight for under $200. And it gets better. For you, my listeners, you're getting 67% off, and they're covering the shipping. Just scan the QR code on your screen or go to mcgtac.com/alpha to get yours today. The only catch, supplies tight, and these are already flying off the shelves. So if you want a sight built for the best, now's your shot. Grab yours before they shut down the orders. Again, folks, limited Stinger sales are on sale right now. Go to mcgtac.com/alpha to get yours. And if you're watching the replay, that link will be down in the description as well. Colonel, hopefully none of my audience is planning to go run and visit Scientology buildings. They'll just watch
a viral TikTok video.
They are. It is going viral. But to bring it back over here to, you're definitely not going to get into this Fairfield facility. Please continue.
Okay, so just a little bit more on Ling Timco Vote LTV. I wanted to do just a very short background. James Ling was kind of the architect of LTV. He was known in business circles as a corporate raider, but if you look at what the corporations he was raiding were, they all he basically started an electrical contracting business in Dallas a long time ago. And some people say that that wasn't like a legitimate business. It was just like a foot in the door. But he basically started buying up a whole bunch of very aggressive corporate warfare kind of bidding, overtaking, hostile takeovers of companies. But they all had a general theme. They all had to do with either the Defense Department or the CIA. And then you have Robert McCullough, who adds the Timco so Ling is the L, Timco is the T, which he actually had. It stands for Texas Engineering and Manufacturing Company. Robert McCullough, was basically the aviation guy behind the E-Systems, because LTV eventually comes E-Systems. He's kind of the actual aviation guy behind it. He was involved in aviation manufacturing in the military during World War II. He's kind of the old guy, specialty kind of guy. He also had provided physical hangars and manufacturing facility, floor space designs for the facilities in Taiwan. Charles Text Thornton is the vote behind it, VOUGHT. That name comes from a company called Chance Vote Aircraft. Basically, Thornton, who founded Litton Industries, he was kind of what people referred to as a whiz kid. He was a statistician and management expert. He basically was called in during World War II into the War Department to do a reorganization. He also worked hand in hand with Robert McNamara, who later becomes Kennedy's Secretary of Defense. And after the war, entered civilian aviation sector, primarily again in intelligence and defense. So that's kind of the guys.
That was Vance International Airways, right?
His Chance Vote.
A Chance Vote.
C-A-N-C-E and then a separate word, VOUGHT, Chance
Okay.
Vote Aircraft. That was
Okay.
his baby originally. So that's kind of what he brought to the table.
Okay. And the reason I asked is because I wanted to make sure I had the right Robert P. McCullough, because I was like, why do I know that name? And so when I bring this particular person up, it says Robert Paxton McCullough. If you guys are familiar with Lake Havasu, Arizona, you know the famous, London Bridge that's over the channel. Very popular spots for all the clubs and everything's out right there for the river folk. Well, this is the guy that did that purchase to bring that bridge over. So, but it says that when I go to McCulloch International Airlines, it brought up Vance International Airways. That's why I was wondering if I wanted to make sure I heard you right. So I'm not sure if this is the same Robert P. McCullough, but it might be. It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, these guys definitely were movers and shakers. Okay. So let me go on to this next article. This is an article that was written about JFK. 60 years after JFK's death, it is more and more apparent that Kennedy was a victim of a palace coup. So LTV mysteriously made an appearance in this article. David Harold Byrd, B-Y-R-D, a close personal friend of Lyndon Johnson, who owned the Texas School Book Depository, where Oswald weirdly got a job. Byrd was a wealthy oil man, in addition to a military contractor, owner of an aeronautics company called LTV in Dallas. According to Peter Dale Scott in 1970, proved in his unpublished manuscript, The Dallas Conspiracy, that Byrd and fellow investor James Ling, the L in LTV, who was also a friend of LBJ's, made large insider stock buys of 132,000 shares of LTV in the weeks before JFK's assassination. These insider stock buys occurred at a time when SecDef McNamara and news publications in the fall of 1963 were predicting defense cuts. Did they know something?
It makes no sense to make that investment if that's what's going on.
LTV stock rocketed upward during the Vietnam War, and it traded as high as $169 a share in 1967 in the midst of the Vietnam War. Byrd would not have been happy about the Kennedy's administration to cut the oil depletion allowance, because they're all in oil, and that was a big bone for the oil industry, which, let's see, nor would he have been happy about the fact that military contracts were going to dry up. So, moving on, Johnson had held...
Real quick before you go on to the next one, Gladio has destroyed another story for me. Okay, because I love the movie Pearl Harbor. I don't care, judge me all you want. But it turns out that David Harold Byrd was very close friends with the famous aviator Jimmy Doolittle. You guys will know the Doolittle raid.
Yeah.
And the movie Pearl Harbor is based off of that Doolittle raid, or at least, yeah, it's one of the main sections of it. So if these dudes were homies, then that means freaking Jimmy Doolittle was probably dark, and it's probably why they paint him as a hero in the movies to begin with. So another story crushed by Operation Gladio.
Yep. Okay. So tying another piece of this together, LBJ, he had basically this guy that everybody refers to as his hitman, Mac Wallace, who murdered a golf pro, John Kinser, in 1951 in Austin. And he was convicted of first-degree murder, but only received a sentence of 5 years probation and no jail time for murdering somebody. Johnson had helped Wallace escape a long prison term after he murdered a man who had been dating his sister, and then arranged a security clearance for him so that he could work as a security contractor. Where? At LTV. Yeah, the guy that's a hitman for LBJ gets a job at LTV. So nothing weird about that at all. Okay, so James Ling, Bird's partner, who was also close to LBJ, and kept a bust of him in his office, is the guy that purchased that LTV stock. So nothing weird about that at all. All right, so there's that piece. Let me move on to the next piece. This is crazy shit. Let's start here. This is Whitney Webb's book, One Nation Under Blackmail. She refers to, I have to back up a little bit. There's a bunch of stuff going on with a guy by the name of Joe Albritton, who was chairman of a bank in Washington, D.C. called Riggs Bank. He was the director, also sat on the board of a bank called First International. And Riggs was described by the Wall Street Journal as having a long-standing relationship with the CIA and maintained accounts for a number of people, among them Prince Bandar bin Sultan, the Saudi Arabia ambassador to the U.S. from 1983 to 2005, who also had who was in Jeffrey Epstein's contract book.
Interesting.
In early 2005, Riggs pleaded guilty to money laundering after an extensive Justice Department investigation. Sitting alongside Bush and Albritton on the board of First International was John Murchison of the Murchison, Texas oil family. John Murchison was less known than his counterparts, Clint Murchison Jr. and Sr., they're all related, but was by no means less prolific when it came to oil and gas holdings and other business concerns. In 1982, John's son, John Murchison Jr., was appointed to the board of Gulf Resources and Chemical Corporations following the firm's takeover of a British man's tax exile shelter type thing in Switzerland named Alan Clure. First National appeared to have been closely linked to LTV, a major Dallas-based defense contractor and CIA contractor, with light attack aircraft during the Vietnam War. And that was actually for the CIA, not the military. John Murchison was listed among the directors of LTV, as was oil man Edwin Cox, who was also found on the board of First National. And again, this is a bank that does money laundering. In 1970, LTV board was ran by a Texas businessman by the name of Robert Stewart III, who 2 years later would organize First National as a holding company for First National Bank, and then served as the chairman of that bank. So when we were doing the research into the CIA, the Mafia, and George Bush Sr., in Pete Bruton's book, there's a guy that shows up all the time in that book called Walter Mitchner, who had ties to the Mafia, ties to the CIA, and direct ties to George H.W. Bush. So like Walter Mitchner, Stewart was incredibly connected both economically and politically. In 1970, the New York Times announced that he had taken over the LTV board and notes that Senator John Tower, who also was intimately involved in the savings and loan money laundering operation, was his very good friend. The same article attributes the following quote to Stewart. I've always been on the conservative side of politics. Some people refer to me as a little to the right of Louis XIV, which is weird. He maintained positions on boards of various corporations and was on the board of Pepsi when Pepsi was behind one of 3 U.S. companies behind the coup in Chile. He sat on the Pepsi board, which, by the way, had one of the largest navies, larger than most countries, from 1965 through at least 1995. He also was affiliated with Braniff Airlines, which also comes into play with LTV, because they at some point buy Braniff Airlines. LTV does. In the 1980s, Michener served on the board of several of the same aviation companies as Stewart, one of which was called, let's see, he was in another corporation called Arco, which had formerly been Atlantic Richfield in the 80s. And by the way, all of these are related to George H.W. Bush as well. So just so everybody's on the same sheet of music's there. Now let's get to E-Systems and what she has to say about E-Systems. E-Systems is very, very interesting because it goes into Vince Foster and not Vince Foster, sorry, a company that surfaced systematics, and the Inslaw affair is E-Systems. Dallas, and you know what Inslaw affair is, right? That's the Promise software that the CIA modified, and Mossad got a copy of it, and it was used to money launder. Are you familiar with that story?
You've told me about it.
Yeah, Promise software. It's Promise without the E. It's referred to, Inslaw is the name of the company that the developer of the Promise software owned, and he basically wanted to sell it to the government. And when he went to sell it to the DOJ, they basically stole it from him, and then he sued them for like decades, trying to get his company back and his software back. And they basically said, F you, we've got the thing, we created a backdoor to it, go away. And he never was successful in recovering his software. He's still alive. So let's go on.
The 2 special counsels in that case was William P. Barr and Janet Reno.
Yes, that's true. Isn't that interesting, Mr.
That
C.I.A.?
is. Yes.
Yeah. So authors James Norman and a guy by the name of J. Orlin Grab, Grabbe, wrote a book and have discussed E-Systems of having a close relationship with systematics. However, the CEO of Altel, a successor company to systematics, has denied that that relationship exists. Among the claims made by the authors is that sensitive E-Systems computer code ended up in the hands of Israel 30 days after it was developed and first deployed to the NSA. While parsing out the details of the connections between E-Systems and Systematic is difficult, E-Systems did maintain a tight connection with other corporations located at the heart of the Inslaw affair, Wackenhut. William Rayburn, who had served as the director of the CIA under President LBJ, joined the board of directors at Wackenhut in 1971. Press reports show that at least by 1977, he was also on the board of E-Systems. Wackenhut's annual report illustrated for a time that he served on the board of these companies at the same time. E-Systems' connections to the intelligence community are longstanding. The company began as LTV Electro Systems, a wholly owned subsidiary of LTV, which is the Texas-based, this is according to Whitney Webb's book, the Texas-based defense contractor that was then rapidly expanding to military contracts related to the Vietnam War. And again, it's not military contracts, Whitney, it's CIA contracts. They are not the same. As discussed in another chapter, LTV had shared multiple connections with the first international bank shares, the CIA-linked bank that George H.W. Bush joined immediately after leaving the CIA in 1976. LTV Electrosystems held a major share of the defense contractors that LTV received, having consolidated after another LTV subsidiary, LTV Military Electronics Division, kind of consolidated both of those divisions into one. In 72, LTV Electrosystems was spun off as an independent company and rechristened E-Systems under the leadership of John Dixon, who we talked about earlier. So, all very interesting, right?
It is.
All right.
So many names that pop up in this that we've talked about on Gladio before.
So many. And that's what blew my mind. I mean, I'm looking into weather modifications, and the whole freaking thing is just screaming everything that we've covered. The same locations, the same people, the same companies. So I think it's probably fair to say that the CIA is behind weather modification. As crazy as that seems, and it does seem crazy to me, I think it's a very fair thing to say.
I wouldn't argue with you. I mean, look at it. Here's way, and I pulled this up at the beginning of the show because I wanted to mention it, and people can make of it as it will. And we joke about this, but it's funny. When was the last time we had a hurricane hit Florida? Well, let me tell you guys, for those that don't remember.
One last year.
October of 2024.
Yeah.
During the Biden's administration, so from January of 2021 to the end of 2024, you had 7 hurricanes that hit Florida. Since Trump's taken office, you've had 0.
0.
Maybe it's divine. Maybe it's just luck, or maybe, just maybe.
So let me give you another reason. We've not had a hurricane since the Gulf of America came around.
There you go. Hurricanes are afraid of the Gulf of America. Listen, I'll sign off on that. I'm just telling you, folks. I mean, are we really going to think that that's a coincidence? It's interesting. I mean, this is not, we didn't even plan it this way. But this past Sunday in the show that I did with Ghosts, the Middle East in 30 minutes-ish, you guys haven't seen those shows, you absolutely love it. You get the gems in the ish part of that 30 minutes. But we're talking about the weather modification weapon systems in the Middle East.
Yes.
And or whether they are or not, some people write them off as satellite infrastructure. But you have, weapon systems from Israel that have been put in certain countries out there to protect satellite infrastructure. There's just things that don't add up. And then when you look at some of the reports that are out there, it lines up with these changes in weather. And it's just, one has to ask. And again, we have seven hurricanes during Biden's administration. We're into the second year of Trump's and 0 with Florida. I mean, you all can derive your own opinion of what you think that is. I'm going to subscribe to Trump's got his hand on their weapon systems and say,
Well, but you say that, and you have all of these freaky weather things going on right now. Like, I don't know if you've seen the videos of the weather that went through Missouri with like the softball size hail smashing out people's windows.
I haven't seen it, but I've heard of it.
It was totally freaky. And of course, the first thing people do is start looking for those. They have now the capability of looking at where those things emanate out of. Weirdly enough, one of the places they emanate out of is Jacksonville, Florida. And I find it incredibly interesting that there's a significant intelligence capability at the military installations around the Jacksonville area. So what I would suggest everybody do from now on is try to correlate where we have significant CIA presence. Not that you need it, because in the case for the electronic signals, you do. So for those of you, and again, I'm not the expert on this, but there are generation centers that send out these electromagnetic waves that supposedly, if I understand this concept right, the seeding happens with the aircraft and it's activated by these electromagnetic waves. So if you know where those emanate out of, try to figure out whether those are close to military installations where we know the CIA has significant presence, because that's where they would be the strongest, like at Fort Bragg, like at MacDill, and those types of things. Because now, based on the research that I've done, I'm absolutely convinced that this is a CIA capability, and they have all of the facilities and the infrastructure laid in to carry out these missions. And we have proof that they've done it. The Vietnam papers saying they did it are declassified. We know they've done this.
Yeah, it was called Popeye or something like that.
Yeah. So, just something to think about.
Matter of fact, I think I had looked that one up. Let me see. Operation Popeye.
Yeah.
U.S. Air Force, it says, was a military cloud seeding project carried out by the U.S. Air Force during the Vietnam War in 67 to 72. The very highly classified program attempted to extend the monsoon season over specific areas of the Ho Chi Minh Trail to disrupt North Vietnamese military supplies by softening road surfaces and causing landslides.
Yep. So we know they have the capability. We know now where the facilities are that they carry out the capability at. And it fits the model of them stationing and flying these aircraft out of a foreign country, but doing operations inside the United States with those aircraft for plausible deniability. And guess where, if anything ever came out about this program, they would accuse China of doing it because it's in Taiwan.
It's crazy. When I was researching LTV that you're talking about, they had a drone in the 60s that they deployed in
the 50s.
And they deployed it in a prototype flew in 1970, but the program was abandoned without producing a service-ready aircraft. Now I'm not buying that for 1 second.
So they're probably talking about in the 1950s, the declassified CIA document basically said the same thing. They created Oxcart was the program name, and it was a basic drone aircraft that was to be launched off of another aircraft, and then had its own system to maintain flight. And it's interesting when you look at all of the different, that was done by Lockheed in their Skunk Works facility out in Southern California, as what was the U-2 and then eventually the SR-71. And there was lots of information out there about those systems, but those systems were created in the 1950s, and the U-2 is still flying today. Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. But they said We literally, well, and here's your documentation knowing that we had drone aircraft. Go back and look at Operation Northwood that Lyman Lemonsker wrote. It talks about flying drone aircraft into buildings, high-rise buildings, and blaming Castro for it. That was 1962 that was written. So if he's putting it on a classified plan, Operation Northwood, we had the capability in 1962 to do it.
Then imagine what we have now. And I'm not talking about what they're showing us.
I'm telling you, what we have now, we will know about in 30 years.
Because I just think about, I can, my recent, government experience was law enforcement. And I see them releasing stuff. I'm like, that ain't new, bro. Like, I was using that in 2009, 2010. What are you guys talking about? So if you're bringing that to the public knowledge now, then shoot, I should reach out to my boys and be like, hey, what are you guys using now?
So let me also tell you this. We started with the U2, just kind of the background of it. Do you know what the CIA got the preponderance of the initial U2 aircraft, but they had to, for a cover story, in case one was lost and discovered, which happened. The Air Force got a handful of U2s as well. Do you know what the U2 was classified as? A weather aircraft. It was simply flying 70,000 feet in the air to gather weather information. That was the story that was sold to the public in case they lost one. The Air Force has a handful of weather aircraft to go around and chart weather. And now we fast forward to the weather aircraft location in Taiwan, actually housing the weather modification aircraft. That's crazy.
It is. It is. Well, Colonel, I am the part of the show that hit me the hardest today was the Jimmy Doolittle. That one's rough. That one's rough. But you listen, I'll digest that like I normally do with Gladio. But again, one thing, and I wrote it in my notes because I wanted to make sure I didn't forget, because I know there are a lot of new people and they're like, well, why does that stuff matter now? And for the audience that's been around for Gladio, but this specifically, why does this matter now? If you think back to what Colonel was explaining tonight with the way these contracts work, so these what would you call them? The sole contract?
Sole source
contracts and these capabilities. And think about how, one of the comments I made tonight, we keep seeing the same names pop up. Well, if this is the way the shadow wars were being operated back then, and we know that we're in a war today and we call it the information war, the playbook doesn't change, folks. So what am I saying? Well, in information war, we're talking about pundits that are bought, space hosts that are bought, podcasters that are bought. That mechanism about how they're bought and how they're used, these, whether it be a media company or an individual, these are the modern day LTVs. These are the modern day entities and companies that are being bought. But something that was very important that you said too, Colonel, is the government gets this plausible deniability because it's not the government company that's doing it. Well, how do you circumvent? And I'm saying, forget about the Smith Modernization Act for a second. But if you have we saw this with USAID, and now we're seeing it with Southern Poverty Law Center, these people that are paying other third parties sums of money for whatever it may be, research or whatever the case may be. And then that company turns around, maybe like Red Seed Ventures, and I'm just using a hypothetical, all of a sudden goes and says, hey, I'm going to pick up, I don't know, hypothetically, we'll say Tucker Carlson or Megan Cowley or Joe Schmo podcasts. This is the same concept of then. These are just the new tools and weapon systems. And so when you hear Colonel kind of explaining and mapping out what these relationships are like, this company goes and adopts this one. Well, then all of a sudden it's bankrupt, but then it gets bought out by this company. It's the same people, and and legacy families are all involved. You see the same thing in this new media world if you're paying attention. And every time we do a Gladio show, Colonel, I'm always looking at how does that look like? What model do I know of today that
Yes.
matches what you're talking about then? And there's always one.
Yes.
There's always one.
Yeah. So also Jimmy Doolittle was commissioned by President Eisenhower in 1954 after the CIA coup in Iran and the CIA coup in Guatemala to do a CIA review.
Damn it.
Yeah. It's actually called the Doolittle Report. It was issued in 1954 and remained classified for a very long time. It's declassified now, but yeah, he knew everything.
He knew everything. Well, Colonel, I can't wait to see you on whatever Alex Jones's show is going to be called now. I've been beating him up, but I can't wait to see you on there. I can't wait to see you continue to grow. As a matter of fact, a name popped in my head tonight, and I wrote it down so I don't forget. I'll tell you right now when we go off air.
Okay.
Someone I think we can get you on fairly quickly, who has also a very large audience. But in the meantime, why don't you tell my audience where they can find you and what you have going on?
Well, I just did a show this morning in Thailand. There's a bunch of expats from all over the world that kind of group together. One of the guys that asked me to actually, they do a monthly meeting and they have, podcasters present information. Cynthia Chung and Matt, her husband, has been the guy, your Badlands guy. Eric they actually
Brilliant mind.
Yes, very. They have done shows with this group over in Thailand, and they've actually visited them. The guy that hosts the show owns a resort over there. So we're invited if you ever want to go to Thailand. And so I did a show with them this morning. I will post it as soon as it's available because they do editing on it. And it was very interesting. Obviously, a lot of very smart people, great questions at the end. But it kind of blew them away. I just basically did our generic Gladio 101, kind of walked through the history of it, what it was. It was a lot of fun. So the word's getting out there. And so obviously we do our 4:00 show every day. We're currently we're talking about Iran-Contra right now in Safe for Democracy, written by John Prados. 4:00 on Spaces and on Rumble at the Colonel's Corner.
And make sure you check out the Colonel's Corner, the playlist, because that thing's been made easy for you guys. So check that stuff out. You guys, you don't have to wait till Wednesdays. You can listen to the Colonel Monday through Friday. Get her done. Also, do me a solid. Down in the description on whatever platform you're watching is all the links to the sponsors, partnerships, and affiliates, including the ones that sponsor today's show specifically. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Colonel, right after this, I want to tell you about this if you could hang on for about 90 seconds. And I'll see you guys tomorrow morning, Badlands Daily at 10 a.m. Eastern. Good night. God bless and simplify.